Thank you for your patience, everybody. Okay. Hello, all the platforms. If you're watching me on Insta, Facebook, YouTube, I just want to say happy Monday, everybody. And how do you feel on Monday mornings? This is the question that I have. How do we feel on Monday mornings? Today, I'm going to be talking about playing your strengths. And it maybe from a little bit different angle than you've heard before. So for those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that I have a particular little flag that I bear called really igniting, activating, being for people living and expressing from their zone of genius. Now, I first learned about this from Gay Hendricks about 20 years ago and studied with him around the zone of genius. In fact, I studied with both him and Katie for about 8 years. And one of his premises is that if we are if we're involved in activities that are in competence, or excellence zone, then we're going to get tired. We're going to get worn out. Life isn't going to be as stimulating, as alive. So looking at what is my zone of genius, not just the activities, but the strengths underneath those activities. So, you might love teaching. That could be your zone of genius, but how you teach, the way you teach that's unique from all other teachers is actually the quality and the capacities underlying the skill. That's where we want to look for our strengths. That's where we want to look for our genius. And Gay's premise is that each of us should be able to live about 95% of the time in our zone of genius. Well, when I first heard this, I was living about 5% of the time in my genius. Well, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 20%. And I couldn't fathom a life where I could spend most of my time just doing what I loved. And part of what's hard to access about that, and he actually, in the beginning, people didn't grasp what he was saying. People didn't get it. And in fact, I started to develop physical processes to help people really get what genius was, so they'd be able to read it when they were in genius. And as a genius coach, that's one of my gifts, is I kind of get these little chills when I'm working with a client and I feel they're talking in the area that is their brilliance and their genius. And I'm like, you need to do more of that. And it doesn't matter if we get paid all the time for all of our genius. There's certain times, like I have a lot of athletic ability, but I didn't choose to be a professional athlete for a lot of reasons. But when I'm involved in sport, like there is a genius quality there for me. And I do it because it actually contributes to everything that I'm doing, everything else that I'm doing. So when I'm participating in tennis, I'm more alive, I'm more engaged, my whole life works better. And so sometimes our strengths or our genius capacities are in service of the things that we do that make us money. So it's not about always making money with every genius, but I really believe that if you're going to spend 4 to 8 hours a day doing something, might as well be the thing that makes you the most alive, that makes you come alive. Are you doing the thing that makes you come alive? This is my question. Are you doing the thing that makes you come alive? And how much of the time are you doing it? The good news is that wherever you are, whether you're in your genius 5% of the time or 20% of your time, you can make a new commitment. You can organize your energy. It's like, I wonder what it would be like to live in my genius most of the time. So more than 50%, right? That could be a good starting place if you're below 50%, is to just move into that space of wondering what that would be like. But for a lot of people, the barrier to entry here is that they've been raised in a world that says life is about struggle, life is hard, you don't get to have fun all the time, blah, blah, all these messages that have us go, settle for the status quo where we're not alive, we're not engaged, we're not happy. So that's a conversation it's so powerful to have with ourselves. Am I doing what lights me up? Am I doing what contributes the most to this world? Like, is that where, and my thought, word, and deed, and the activities and the skills and the things that I'm doing, am I outputting from this high vibe, or am I outputting from stress? Am I outputting from burden, right? Of have to. Where is your output coming from is so important. It's not actually as important what you do. It used to be in the early years, I thought that genius was about the activities that you did. I'm getting more and more like, yes, like I freaking love to facilitate. And when I facilitate a group, that's where I would say the most genius and strength and possibility comes through me. Hi, Kara. Is when I'm facilitating. Now, I have also been asked to come and facilitate in university settings. And I don't love that as much because the people had to be there and they weren't choosing to be there. And I was like, I don't like teaching people that don't want to be here. There is certain vehicles, I would say, that allow us to be more of those capacities, right? But it actually is the capacity itself that is the genius. It is that engine that's powering up our system. It's kind of like, if you were to turn on a light switch, if it wasn't connected to power, you would have to flip that thing forever, and nothing would happen. When you do not operate from your zone of genius, from your capacities, from your brilliance, and you're taking action in certain areas, you're going to have a more difficult time getting traction, because you don't have as much power behind your actions. So this is, if you've been following Mondays with Megs, this is crucial to self-esteem. This is crucial to self-confidence. This is like maybe the most important part of it. It's so funny because it's like, I teach this stuff. You could probably see me light up. I remember the first time, because I didn't know what my genius was. I was sitting in Kay's classes and I'm like, I don't understand. I don't get it. What finally evolved for me is that one of my most dynamic genius capacities is recognizing, activating, and growing genius in other people. And so as a child, I used that genius against me. How did I use it against me? Because I could see how amazing people were. That's one of my gifts, is I can see like the lights in people that other people can't see. I'm like, oh my God, like, have you thought about doing that for a living, right? There are probably at least 100 people out there. Maybe actually as I'm going, maybe thousands of people out there that are like doing something different because I challenged them to, because I was like, I saw something and they created different lives for themselves from this different space of potency. So, but I used it against myself from the perspective of, I would look at people and I would see their greatness. I would see how amazing, like people, like the gifts we have are so beyond words, you guys. Like to me, this is the ultimate leverage point that you have for aliveness, for energy, for youth, for money. One of the parameters that Gay talks about with regards to genius is that it's the thing that you do when you do it, or what the activity or the wherever it is that maybe you could be walking on a walk and you feel like alive. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a particular activity, but what is it that when you are being it or doing it, that you have more energy after than before? What is it that when you are involved in it, time disappears? And our genius, one of the other questions that allows us to get clear about our genius is what is the highest ratio of abundance for time spent? The highest ratio of abundance for time spent. So like for me, right? if I am facilitating a large group, you know, I don't know, like depending on the size of the group, that could be $5,000 an hour. It could be $500 an hour. But I'm going to tell you what, it's a lot more per hour than if I go try to make my own copies. Like for me to have people that do the things, that pay them to do the things that I'm not genius at. This is one of the ways to maximize genius, right? Is that I make more money by not doing the things that I'm not good at, that are even things that I might be good at, but that don't bring me aliveness. So the idea is to kind of stay in this aliveness place. Back to the conversation about how I used it against me is like, I got so sidetracked because like the brilliance of people, I freaking dig it. Like, oh my God. So, but what I would do with that as a child and growing up, and probably in my early 20s, is I would see the brilliance and the greatness in other people. And then I would be like, oh, like, I'm not that. So I got really caught in a comparison loop, and it really hurt my sense of self, my sense of personal power. And so a lot of our genius capacities have a little bit of a shadow. And so we have to work them. We have to keep them in the zone of power for ourselves, because everything that's awesome tends to have a shadow side to it. So in looking at increasing our sense of self-worth, I'm calling that self-esteem. There's other words for it, self-confidence. That really one of the major factors is looking at what's the best of me and being willing to play from what is the best in you. So, gosh, about 15 years ago, I was going to a tennis lesson, and my coach gathered us all together and he says, okay, he said, how do you win games? And I was like, oh, well, keep your eye on the ball. Like we were all giving answers like that. And he was just kept looking at me and smiling because he also coached with me, right? And he looked me right in the face and goes, Megan, you play your strengths. Like you taught me this. I'm like, oh yeah. This is like, I don't care who you are. If you are the best of the best, if you're Roger Federer stepping on the court, you're going to go with your forehand. You're going to go with the particular kind of serve you have. You're going to set your matches up so that you can play more from the place of your strengths. And I was like, oh yeah, I teach that stuff. So my question for you guys is, to what degree are you playing from your strengths? To what degree are you playing from your genius? Now, I want to speak to something, because I'm hoping that in these podcasts, like I know a lot of people have heard the genius conversation, but I want to put a little bit of a different lens on it today because of some things that I've been exploring. And one of the reasons, so many of you know, I have a workshop coming up called Self-Esteem is Sexy. And by the way, it's live in Salt Lake City, July 28th in the evening and all day on the 29th. I have a DJ. I'm also going to be live streaming it around the world. So if you're not here, don't worry about it. You can play in your jammies if you'd like. But part of why I'm bringing that program forward is that I believe that there's been some misnomers in that world. And this idea that, some of us just have low self-esteem, I think is bullcrap. Okay. So like, show me a 2-year-old with low self-esteem. This is something that is trained into us. This is something that sometimes it's like our parents don't know how to talk to us. Sometimes we have older crappy brothers and sisters, or we get picked on at school. But the biggest thing that I see with people that are having a lower sense of self or self-worth is that these people have endured trauma, and maybe not just one trauma, but like a series of traumatic events over their lifetimes. And what happens when we have a painful experience or something that feels like trauma in the body is we go into a fight or flight place inside our brain. And in that part of your brain, everything is right and wrong and good and bad. And what happens is that when we've gone through a certain amount of trauma, the brain has a negative bias. It has like a Velcro for negativity. And so we start waking up in the morning going, okay, what bad thing is going to happen today? And am I going to be able to handle it? Am I going to be able to deal with it? And it's not so much that we have a self-esteem problem, is that we're stuck in a particular area of our brain that sorts for the negative. And so what happens is if we're sorting for the negative, we're not going to sort for our strengths. We're not going to look at our strengths. We're going to look at our problems. We're going to look at what's wrong with us, right? And with people that have chronic trauma, or like meaning that you maybe experienced it over periods of time. And I want to speak to something in particular today because I had a lot of trauma growing up in childhood. A lot of my childhood was lived in a PTSD state. And when I first came to my first modality that I learned how to do with people was rapid eye therapy, which helps. It's a natural trauma releasing process, which is really powerful and really beautiful. I sort of, between releasing some of that trauma and I worked really hard to reprogram my brain because I grew up with a negative bias. My mom grew up raised her babies during the Depression, my grandma mom that raised me. And she was always scared. She was scared of bad things happening all the time. And so being a little sponge, I took some of that on. By the way, some of our negative bias isn't even ours, like 90 some percent PS. Anyway, so I did a lot of changing, but I still didn't feel very alive. And then when I started understanding this genius work and I started diving in, like I have spent probably more hours opening to, activating, learning what my genius is, what my genius capacities are. By the way, it's infinite. So if you think keep going. I mean, it's like I said, it's the ultimate leverage point because nobody has to motivate you to do it. You're so excited to do those things, to be those things, that you just have aliveness. Like it is the solution for longevity. It is, by the way, I just read this recently, that one of the most significant factors in having a vital long life is a sense of purpose, that why you're here. You feel it. Why? Because that gives the message to what they call the telomerase, which is the enzyme that supports the telomeres, which is one of the biggest factors in how we age and how fast we age and all of that. But it says, I'm not done yet. I got more to do. And so it keeps generating life force for you. Like I'm telling you guys, like if you said, Megan, you could only do and explore one thing for the rest of your life, and that would be really hard for me, those of you who know me, because I love to learn about all kinds of stuff, it would be genius, because it gives you the most bang for your buck. It gives you leverage in every area of your life. The most happy people are the people living in genius. The most youthful, the healthiest people are the people living in their genius. That is the most important thing you could be looking at, is how can I live more in my genius? How can I do that? Right. So, but what happened for me was, so I've been doing this 28 years. I've been coaching and facilitating all over the world for almost 3 decades. And just like everybody else, I have challenges and things that go on. Just because you're on a conscious path doesn't mean bad things don't happen. I would say that in some ways, those of us on a conscious path get challenged more because we're here to learn, we're here to grow. And so a lot of times we have more challenges in some ways than other people. And because we chose that, like big spirits don't choose small challenges. Hello, right? So I went through a period of time about 14 years ago, and both of my parents passed away within 6 months of each other. And I ended a 13-year relationship. And that sort of ended this community that her and I had created together. And I would say that I went through sort of a dark night of the soul. And there were a lot of rumors and a lot of lies. And like, it was like sort of this public, I don't know, like a public, I felt like I was on display for judging. And I didn't do very well. Right. And, I probably went through a couple years where I sort of left the public eye. I continued to coach, but I would say that I was really contemplating, did I want to continue this work? Did I still want to be a coach? Did I still want to be in transformation? Did I want to go get it just a job and like be a nobody? Right. And that was a very, very, very difficult time for me. And obviously I'm still here, and I went through this whole thing of transforming what I did. I started creating at a whole other level. I started stepping into my genius in a much bigger way. But that trauma had affected me. And then I went through another experience a few years ago where I almost died. And I was in a sort of a traumatic place inside my brain for maybe 2 or 3 years. And I realized that recently that took a toll. Like, it brought me back to the area of my brain where I thought in right or wrong, good and bad. It's that PTSD where I started waking up scanning for problems, right? And I realized that I needed to reconnect with my strengths again, that my brain had the trauma wire had been re-tripped, even though I had done all that work. And I was coming from this different place. And I have, in this process, I've been realizing that, that I need to heal my brain again. I need to go through that process of releasing the trauma and putting in good. In the thing that I wanted to share with you guys today is one of the things that I'll be doing in my live event. And by the way, if you do participate via live stream, you're still going to get a chance to do all the body exercises, because the physical part is really, really important. We have to reset our nervous system so that we are actually operating from a different place. Like, here's the deal. Like, if we can come to that state of being of our 2-year-olds, then we don't have self-esteem problems. We don't have self-love problems. We don't have any of that, because we're in our natural state of our being. And if you're not in that place of positivity, of possibility, of creativity, you're probably somewhere else in your brain. You're probably in that little tiny amygdala that's going, oh my God, what bad thing is going to happen? And that's the strongest part of our brain, because that is the thing that has been active for 40, 50,000 years. Like, we've only been in the cerebral cortex, in that idea of love and genius and possibility, for really 3,000 years or so. So it's kind of the new kid on the block. So when we go through hard times in life, we're often, no matter how much work we've done, sometimes it will kick us back into that other place inside of our brain. And so then we get to learn again, and we get to grow again. And so for those of you who have been involved in personal growth and development for a while, you kind of know this. For those of you who are new and you're just getting woke and everything's like bright and shiny, milk that sucker, milk it. It's awesome. And know that you're going to have, that's going to be challenged. You're going to have an opportunity to anchor in your greatness and your strengths over and over and over and over again. And I realized recently that I had basically, from having allowed myself to live in these traumatic states for long periods of time, that I was going back into this old mode of seemingly not believing in myself, right? But really what's been happening, or what was happening, is that I was in this little fight or flight place inside my mind. And one of the most effective things that I'm going to share it with you, this is just a little tidbit of what I'll be doing at the live event. But one of the things that I've been doing in the morning when I notice my brain going online with the scanning for problems is I do a little bit of breath work. I'm going to be doing a Mornings with Megs series the end of July too, that I'm going to tell you about soon. I'm actually I don't know if it's going to be next week's Mornings with Megs or the following, is I'm going to do a morning routine that allows you to come online, right? So I do my morning routine. And recently I realized that when I wrote down a list of 10 intrinsic qualities that are my capacities or my natural genius. And then I wrote down 10 things that I know that I do really well. And then I just made a choice to create from that place, to create from my creativity, to create from my resourcefulness, to create from the inspired. And inspiration is one of my natural geniuses, right? And so I was like, okay, whatever my brain is looking at and saying is like, this is a possible problem, right? I'm like, okay, well, that might be true. I don't try to talk myself out of those problems. You can't talk yourself out of being scared. Like the positive affirmation group, right? Is like, just think positive. Like, no, with fear, it doesn't work that way. You have to release that fear. You have to transmute that fear in some way. Or sometimes fear is saying, I don't have enough information. So sometimes when we're scared, it's because we're actually not playing from our strengths. We're actually playing from a weaker part of ourselves, this fight or flight part of ourselves. So when you can actually honor and look at your strengths and go, okay, cool, I might be scared of that, but what strengths do I have that can counter whatever I'm scared of out there? Because I promise you, who you are at the level of your being is so miraculous and so far beyond any problem you could think up or imagine for yourself. You're an infinite being and you're magic and you're miraculous. So my message this week is play your strengths, learn how to play your strengths. And if you would like to really start living from a stronger, more resourceful, powerful place, I would really invite you to get your hiatus self-esteem is sexy at the end of July. There should be a link in your in these what do you call it, in the feed. It should be links in your feed to go check it out. So thank you for listening today to my very favorite topic of all. And if you've been doing this for a while, this kind of work, and you feel disheartened, like I've done all this work and I'm still in this, it could actually just be where you are in your brain. And if you haven't listened to the other Mornings with Megs, please do that, because I'm having this conversation about very simple ways that you can rewire your brain and start teaching your brain to sort for the positive. This is one of the tools. Write down 10 things that are intrinsically strengths of yours, genius of yours. Write 10 things that you do really well. By the way, when I was doing this, I was like stumped. I couldn't get to 10. Don't worry about it. Reach out to a friend. And that's what I did. I reached out to a friend and they were like, I was like, oh, thanks. Good job. Because you know what? When we are in that place of fight or flight, or the type of, if you've got chronic trauma, you may have switched over into the numb and the don't care. By the way, that's also a trauma state. And so if you're suffering with motivation, lack of motivation, and you don't feel excited about anything, then it could be that you have this similar thing going on. And I would really invite you to come play with me, because once we get into the right space inside of our being, inside of our body, inside of our brain, where that 2-year-old, that full, vibrant, magical 2-year-olds that actually have developed their capacities over many, many years. And it just could be that it's time to resource yourself, to come back to what you know inside yourself, and to rebuild. It's kind of like the bionic woman, right? Or the bionic man. We can rebuild him, right? Like we can rebuild ourselves. Like, are you living the most vital life that you possibly could. By the way, guys, if you have a lot of experience where you're reaching for higher ground and you might have this really good day, this really good month, and it's followed by crap, this is happening for you. We cannot sustain a high level of success when our sense of self is still down here. We'll continue to yo-yo back to it. So please consider coming to the event. And if you can't make it to the event, then just keep listening to this podcast, because I'm going to give lots of tools to help you rebuild to your rebuild to your original self, your original authentic self, who did not have confidence or self-esteem problems. All right, you guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much. And I will most likely see you next Monday, because it's most Mondays with Megs. So I'll let you know if I'm here again next Monday. If you want to get caught up, all of these are on YouTube, on the Megan Silito channel on YouTube, and they're on Facebook too. So I hope to see you somewhere soon. Bye for now.